Hello, everyone. Um, this is my first time doing a blog post in video form. I just thought it would be easier for you to be able to see my mind map while I'm doing this, so I don't have to fiddle with screenshots and a whole bunch of parts and pieces. Um, so yeah, let's go ahead and dive in. This is obviously a world building mind map. I just put it together for this particular blog post as an example. It's incomplete, but it'll give you a good idea, I think. So your main hub is going to be your story world, or probably more effectively would be your region, the main region. In the case of Cursor, which is the first one I did this with, I have it open here actually. It's the valley that is Cursor. So it's just one valley in the much broader world, but it has a whole bunch of cultures in it, and so it's the most effective broad topic to have as the centerpiece for the mind map. Off of that, we have the overarching topics. We have geography, flora and fauna, calendar. You'd put other things in here depending. Like I said, this is incomplete, and you don't have to do it exactly this way. This is an example to get you started, get the idea across. So in geography, for instance, you could list the main geographical elements of this particular region. I did loosely base this off of Cursor. There's a giant mountain ridge around it, and then it's basically a vast desert. So then off of that, you could think about, are there passes through the mountains? Are there tunnels through the mountains? Tunnels under the mountains? Are there any oases in the desert? Whatever. You could add to that. You could do whatever. Just put in what you would want to flesh out in the geography, if you were working on it in a document, which I'll talk about closer to the end. Then you have your various cultures. I have 3 here just because, and then nomads. I made nomads separate because you could put things in there like what they use for their tents or their wagons, or for that matter, what mode of transportation do they use, or what are their living situations like as nomads. So you'd have a different set of information there. But culture 1 is the one that I fleshed out. Again, incomplete. So you have your broader categories. You have you have government, foreign relations, religion, subcultures, everyday life, just the broad things. And then from there, you can branch out and get more and more specific. So Culture 1 is loosely based off of Eyeless from Cursor. So it's a theocracy. It's led by the religious leaders. They're in control of the country. I guess if you had multiple cultures within a country, then you wouldn't so much have government. That would be more of a, you'd have, and I guess you'd probably make the country the main hub, and then branch off with the various cultures within it. But you could do that however you wanted. But anyway, so theocracy, it's led by the religious leaders. So then you have in here the religious leaders. I just tossed in a couple of names. If you have a real life culture that you're drawing from for this culture, then you would put that in as a sub thing here. So like maybe Persia. Oops, can't type. So yeah, so you would put in whatever references. That's just helpful for you to know, so that if you're on Pinterest or something like that, you can look up that culture, draw from that. You can have more than one. That's always fun, is combining various cultures. So that just makes it easier to draw real life inspiration. Foreign relations, you could kind of do this however you wanted. I mean, you could do all of this however you wanted, but so just their relations with the other cultures, with the nomads, if there are any, with, if you did have multiple cultures in one country, then you could have their relationship with the government. What do they think of the government? How does the government treat them? Whatever. So if they're trade partners, you'll probably want to know their imports and exports, at least a little bit. If there are, you want to know whatever the feelings there are in between them. You'd probably want to expand on these. Where did the tension come from? Is it a land thing? Is it whatever? In this case, it is that this culture, culture 1 broke free of culture 2. That's not drawn from Cursier. Culture 1 broke free from culture 2, and then culture 2 kept trying to get them back. So there's just a lot of tension. There's been a lot of bloodshed between the two. And so, yeah, they don't get along very well. Language. You don't have to create a whole language. You can if you want to. But you will probably want to know, just for reference, maybe even just for fun, a few important words for the culture. So words that relate to the culture's values, or terms of endearment, or titles for people. Do they call them king and queen? Or do they even have a king and queen? But yeah, do they call what are the titles for the government leaders? What do they call family members? Do they have a whole bunch of prefixes, like in Japan? So there's just, little things like that could give another ounce of realism to your story world, because those are always cool. I love those. Little details like those are awesome for world building. In religion, you'd start with, is it polytheistic or monotheistic? Is there one god, or are there a lot of gods? So in this case, I picked polytheistic. It doesn't really particularly matter. I mean, it'll affect the culture and stuff, but whatever. So, and then you would just put in the names of the god or gods, and if there are multiple gods, what are each of the gods? What do they represent? Maybe sacrifices that they particularly appreciate, at least according to myth. They don't have to be real gods, but the culture worships them. For that matter, it doesn't even have to be beings necessarily. I mean, you could theoretically have a culture that worships the stars. Um, there's just, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you can do with world building. There's so many possibilities. So you would just put in, like, yeah, here, I'll just, so yeah, sacrifices or specific holidays, just various things that you would want to expand on in your notes. Subcultures. Are there any guilds in your world? Like architects guilds, artisan guilds, or anything like that. Or foreign subcultures, like embassies, or things like Chinatown, where it's different cultures that have come in and settled, made a little bit of home for themselves in this place that is different from where they're from. So things like that. Excuse me. And then there's everyday life. There's home life. How do they decorate their homes? How do they, I don't remember what I have in here. What types of furniture do they tend to have at home? What are their usual meals like? You'd put those things in as sub things, and then you would expand on them in your notes later on. Work. What are common jobs? What is the most prestigious job? That's something that I focus on. It ties into their values, which we haven't gotten to yet. Gender roles. Do they have what we consider in the U.S. Typical gender roles? Are things different? So you just, yeah, you'd put in sub-tiers that are more things to think about. Traditions, you can go crazy with traditions. I've just put in a few little suggestion type things. Life milestones are really good to know, because chances are you're gonna need them at least once. I mean, if you kill off a character, it's helpful to know how your culture treats death, and how they care for the dead, and things like that. If two characters fall in love and want to get married, you're gonna need to know how marriages work. And it's so much easier to come up with these things before you need them. I've figured that out the hard way multiple times. You could also have historical dates, or seasons and solstices, or other natural things like that. You'll want to know their values. The values of a culture, pretty much everything is going to be influenced by this. Correction. Everything is going to be influenced by this. So in the case of Eyeless, or this example, Culture 1, it would be religion, and also tradition. So how are these going to affect the rest of their lives, the rest of their culture? They probably don't like people trying to do something that is outside of the traditional mold. So they probably don't look kindly on people who try new things, and who try to do things differently. So how do they treat people who don't do things the same way. And is it the same for people who are part of their culture versus people who are not, because they understand that people who are not going to conform to their culture? Or do they expect visitors to conform to their culture while they're there? So things like that, things to think about. So you could, your sub branches from this could be questions like that. Questions to think about, questions to answer in your notes. So yeah, and then military. How big is their military? Are there different ranks? Eyeless has... Oh wait, this is not Eyeless. This is Alger. But still. If I can find it. Maybe it's not in here. Oh well. There are four tiers in Alger and Eyeless. And they have names. And I don't remember them off the top of my head. But how many ranks do they have? What do the various ranks oversee? What are they called? Things like that. So yeah, basically the job of this mind map is to figure out what you need to expand on. You can take it as detailed as you want to, or you can leave it at basically bare bones. This is kind of bare bones. You could take it a lot deeper if you wanted to. So, yeah, and then from here, you have a framework, and you can go into a document, a Google document, or a Word document, or a Scrivener file, or an actual binder, whatever works for you, and actually expand on these things, and actually describe the government, and describe how the culture's values affect everything, and whatever else you need. But from here, you have a good idea of where to start and what you need to focus on when you're expanding that, which is a huge help, because when you're just looking at a document that has these broad topics here, you generally have no idea what you even need to start with, because it's just like, this category is so huge. I could go on for hours about this one section. But having done a mind map first, and having figured out what you need to focus on for the various cultures and whatever else, that helps a lot. So basically, this would be my advice for a starting point for world building. It helps to have some idea of the culture ahead of time. Just like an inkling of what their values are or whatever. But yeah, this is the starting point, and then you take it to a document and you start actually delving into the world building, and putting on all the pretty arches and architecture and stuff onto the framework. Yeah. So, and obviously you would want to expand the physical things more, the geography, calendar, flora and fauna, whatever. I obviously didn't go into those much in this particular example mind map, But they would just work the same way. You just start with the bigger picture and then get smaller and smaller until you think you've hit a good point, and then use that as a framework. So hopefully that was helpful, and yeah, I will see you guys later. Bye.